Definitely.
All right. So I know we already talked about this before I started the recording, but the biggest announcement is the hurricane that is causing some disruption in our schedule because Full Sail has declared that classes will be canceled starting Thursday through Monday morning. So while we're an online class and we don't have class meetings after tonight, um, I am going to be adjusting the deadlines into early next week. So we get a few more days for the Photoshop practice and the second part of the visual mission statement. So a little bit more breathing room there. But at the same time, unless you're having trouble with the storm, with power outages or anything, stay on top of these assignments because you don't want it to pile up with what's coming next week at the same time. Other than that, I am currently finishing up the week 2 explorations. So far, things are looking pretty good. So look for those. Probably I should have those all finished up before the end of the night. And then we'll get feedback to you on your visual mission statements starting tomorrow. I will still be grading even though the classes are canceled. So you'll have that feedback before the second part of the visual mission statement comes along. Um, Another thing about the visual mission statement, I don't know if I mentioned this in the archive last week, but the way I grade these is I will make comments directly on your document so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. The comments will be attached directly with different parts of your document, and then I'll re-upload that document to you so you can review it. If you make changes to, say, the week 1 section of the mood board, when you turn in your week 2 project, let me know and I'll go back and look at those and I will adjust your original grade based on that. And I will give back up to 10 points based on the revisions that you make. Because in my view, learning is more of a process. So if I just give you feedback and a grade and move on, you don't have a chance to really look at what it is that happened there and kind of reprocess it and learn from that experience. But be sure to let me know if you do make changes, because otherwise I won't know to go look back at that. And I think that is all as far as announcements go. So we're talking about color this week, and I know you've had some experience working with graphic design. So have you worked much with the color wheel, in particular in color theory?
Oh, definitely. I've done it not only in graphic design, but I've also done it in cosmetology as well.
Oh, okay, yes, yeah. Actually, coincidentally, there you go. I use this example because in in cosmetics, in hair color, you see this put to use. Because when you are canceling out, say, um, if you're doing hair color and you want to cancel out the brassiness, you add purple, right? The purple
Correct.
hues and stuff. And if you look at the color wheel, we go back so you can see it. The opposite of yellow is purple. So those
Yeah,
complements.
definitely. I remember in cosmetology school, we actually had to make a color wheel and we had it right there on our stations.
Yeah, it's a really handy reference, and even in this class, having one available will be really useful. You can easily Google them and find one to look at because they're pretty standard. But it's really good for planning, any kind of color scheme from hair color to cosmetics. And this is the other example was concealer. For those of us who use makeup, if you want to add concealer to hide the circles under your eyes and so forth, you use the color based on that cancels out the color that you're seeing in your skin. So, um, a
Oh,
yellow
definitely.
concealer cancels out the purple, um, and green will take away red splotchiness. So this is kind of a real world example of how this is put to use, because it is used everywhere. The same principles of color theory are used in filmmaking, graphic design, painting, um, cosmetics and cosmetology, you name it, because these are universal. This is just nature, the nature of colored light, the way we see it. Let me go back. So when we look at the color wheel, it is arranged so that similar colors are next to each other. Very different contrasting colors are opposites each other. And um, that idea is really the basis of all of the different color schemes we'll look at. The analogous colors, which I'll get into in a minute, are very similar, and the complementary colors are opposites. They're very different, and they contrast and kind of conflict with one another. And you can make use of that for different effects. So here's the Amelie movie poster. And you can see in this poster, they've used the colors to really make Amelie pop out. Like, she is unmistakably the center of focus, but using that color, she almost literally pops from the background. And that's because they're using complementary red and green. If you take that away and use more analogous colors, it becomes more reserved and subdued, and she kind of fades more into the backdrop. So the point being that color in any kind of media, and whenever I do these lectures, I really like to keep it neutral in terms of what medium I'm talking about, because this will apply in movies and film, as well as graphic design and more two-dimensional media. But you can use color to really influence how your audience perceives the media that you're putting out there. It directs their attention. It creates the mood. It enhances the emotion of the imagery. Sometimes I compare it to the musical score. If you think about the music in a movie, um, it follows the emotional kind of flow of the scenes. And the color is a little more subtle than that, but it plays very much the same part. And we'll look at some examples of that in a minute too. So talking about mood of colors, one of the more important factors when it comes to mood is the warmth or coolness of the colors. And these are divided pretty much in half on the color wheel. Those that are more in the blues, violets, in that area that look like more like cool water or ice are the cool colors, and the warm colors are those that are more fiery or warm, and call to mind ideas of heat. Um, cool colors are more subdued in terms of the energy that you get from them, whereas warm colors tend to be more upbeat, more energetic. And they tend to pop out. And that's what we saw in the Amelie poster, is that warm color really had the impression of popping forward, whereas the green background receded away. So it created a kind of a three-dimensional effect. And this is put to use here. In fact, if you look at nearly any action movie poster, you're going to see something very similar to this. A blue background, usually the sky, with a warm color, usually the hero or the subject is in a warm color in the foreground, and there'll be explosions and so forth. Because this takes advantage of that complementary color contrast, blue and orange, and the green and red, and the cool versus warm color contrast. So it's allowing Iron Man to pop forward, to really the take the center stage. So we keep those two basic principles in mind. Colors from the same side of the color wheel are analogous, and so they're more similar. Colors that are opposites are more contrasting. Then we can pretty much derive all of the basic color schemes that were discussed in the Linda lesson and the reading assignments. So most basic is monochromatic, means one color. And when you're talking about a monochromatic design or painting or what have you, we're talking about something that is there is no other colors, just one single color is used. And it could be lighter and darker varieties of that color, but it's still just one color on the wheel. So this is a Pablo Picasso painting using only blue. And you can see using the lighter and darker shades, you can still create shape and depth and form, but there's not a lot of color richness. And depending on whether you use cool colors or warm colors, you'll either have a really subdued energy like you have here, it almost looks cold, or something more warm. Actually, here's a good comparison. Both of these movies are actually pretty dark in terms of their themes, because Harry Potter gets pretty dark towards the end there. Um, but they approach how they convey that in very different ways. What are some of your thoughts on these two posters as far as the colors they use and how that connects with the major themes and events in the films?
Um, well, I've never seen Gladiator, let me just say that.
Okay.
But I do know that I believe that's more of, it's got like more action in it. So, especially like with the background being more on the warm side, and then um, with him being right there in the front, and he looks really dark. Like he's got like a lot of black to him and everything. So, I mean, that shows like it's gonna be like kind of a dark movie, but I can see it, being like more of an action movie.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as the Harry Potter, it's got the more cool colors and everything, so it's gonna be like more. It seems like it's gonna be more calm and everything.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, right. And the cool colors can be subdued as far as their energy, which can be calm. It can also be kind of depressed, kind of
yeah,
in this
that's what I
case,
was trying to think of
yeah,
too.
yeah. Um, this was for Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, I believe, and
Yeah, it is.
kind of a pretty dark point in the storyline. Things are seeming kind of hopeless, and I don't want to give any spoilers away, but some things happen in that particular installment that the heroes are at a pretty low point, and so this cold, dark poster really gives that sense of hopelessness of kind of like they're really up against some pretty bad odds. And like you said, with Gladiator, it's really warm. It's actually almost looks fiery. The sky looks like it could be on fire back behind him. And it is, like you said, an action film. It is a story of revenge. So he is um, going on this huge, epic quest to get revenge for the death of his family. And it is very dark, and the shadows really play into that. If we had a warm, monochromatic, warm image, it could be very inviting and like a summertime, some kind of summertime scene or very nostalgic. But by adding the shadows in there in front of this very fiery looking backdrop, it gives you that grim and determined look.
Right, and especially with it playing off the shadows and the highlights and everything, like with
Mm-hmm.
the back being extremely highlighted, and then him being right there in the center, and he's very shadowed with it. It also gives off that sense of it as well.
Right. Yeah. And it's almost like the opposite of what we saw with the Amelie poster, where in the Amelie poster, she was highlighted by the color, and so she stood out. In this case, he's in shadow. He's dark. He's a very heavy, dark, ominous figure that isn't necessarily thrown into the foreground, but is is still unmistakably the focal point. So that's monochromatic, which is the single color designs, but very rarely will a single color be sufficient. A lot of times you want more color richness, something which would allow you to do a lot more with your designs. So then you have to decide how you'll use those colors. What feel do you really want to create with those colors? And that's where the complementary and analogous options come into play. Complementary are opposites on the color wheel. And there's some flexibility in there. Say, you know, anything that's nearly opposite is still going to have that same feel, that same contrast. So if it's more of an orange, red, and blue, you still get the effect. It doesn't have to be precise, but that's the idea. Is the more opposite they are, the more high contrast and high energy they will be, in intense energy. Analogous colors tend to be more harmonious because they're more similar. You don't have that contrast to really drive that warm versus cool conflict. Um, but they can still be pretty dramatic depending on the context they're used and the specifics of the colors that you pick. For example, this is a pretty peaceful scene by Claude Monet, and this is the Japanese bridge. Uses cool analogous colors. So it it isn't necessarily cold and depressed like the Harry Potter scene, but it is pretty subdued. It's very peaceful. And this Bugs Life poster uses almost that exact same color scheme. You look at it; it's got the blue, the green, and the sort of yellow green. Whoops, yep. Um, so still kind of subdued, but it has, because of the imagery, it gets a little bit of a humorous look and more playful. And sort of on the opposite side of that coin, analogous warm colors, yellows and oranges and reds, create some more fiery feel. These are those warm colors. So they work well in conveying more fiery emotions. In this case, the imagery connects with that because you have the angry face of the angry bird with the angry colors. Red is often the color of anger. If you think about what was that movie, Inside Out, with the different emotions, anger was red.
Oh yes, I remember that.
Yeah. So those colors, and in fact the colors they picked for those characters, are pretty fundamentally connected in our psyche to those ideas. Red in particular. And let me think if I had any other points about analogous colors. No, but these kind of show the contrast, the possibilities with analogous colors, because they're less dynamic than, say, the Iron Man poster that had the complementary blue and orange, but you can still get a pretty dramatic look using them. Whereas complementary colors have a really strong conflict. The reason these colors have this really dynamic kind of energy or vibration when they're paired together is because your eye color receptors in your eyes are actually competing. The colors are competing for those color receptors attention, essentially. That's a very simplified way of putting it, but um, your color receptors can only perceive a particular range of color at a time, and so these opposite colors are vying for that processing power. To use a computer analogy, that's actually why the colors are arranged the way they are. It's based on the way we perceive colors. That's kind of a tangent. What matters is that when you pair these colors together, they have this kind of conflict between them. So using that, you can make something really stand out. And that's what this is a painting by Vincent van Gogh. What he's done in this case, using the warm colors against the cool color background, he makes that cafe scene really come into focus. That's where our eye is naturally drawn. And you can see how that warm color almost does pop forward, where it allows all the buildings to just kind of recede away. And that same idea is used in modern media pieces. These are some movie poster examples. You can see how the contrasting gold of the setting sun is almost literally like a spotlight on Ariel in the Little Mermaid poster. And just like with the Amelie poster, the Mad Hatter's wild red hair is paired with green, which is the complement to red. This one's actually similar to the one you chose because I think you had another poster for an Alice in Wonderland film, and it's very similar in the vibe. And this has tons of color and has a lot of different complementary pairs. If you really take it apart, you have red and green, you have yellow, and kind of getting into the violet purple range, and
Yeah,
some green and
definitely. Like I
orange as well.
chose the Through the Looking Glass, the
Yeah,
second movie.
right. Yeah, I haven't seen that one yet, um, but but it's a good example because in both cases you can see how they've just really gone over the top in color, and not just colors but complementary colors, because you've got all this color and it's high contrast, so it's going to create this really quirky feel. And you see this a lot with children's media in particular. They'll just like go nuts with the color and deliberately picking opposite color combinations so that it really drives up the fun and energy of the piece. There are a lot of different color schemes we could get into, things like split complementary, triadic, tetradic, which tetradic it means you have two different complementary pairs. But really, if you remember these two combinations, analogous versus complementary, you can build nearly any color scheme as long as you understand those principles. If you think about, there's a color scheme called triadic, which is three colors that are equally spaced on the color wheel. So knowing that opposite colors are high contrast, colors that are close are low contrast, you can expect that equally spaced colors would be kind of in the middle, kind of have moderate contrast with one another. And that's exactly what it is. So once you know those two principles, you can predict how colors will work together. And the other little category I want to cover is achromatic. Achromatic means without color. There's no color. Chroma means color, and A is none, no color. So this is black and white. This is the grayscale. And it's always an option. A lot of times using black and white creates a very serious look, sometimes a very grim and depressed or gritty look. It can be very classic because we associate the black and white films and TV with time periods gone by, and a lot of this depends on the context that's used. But a lot of times you'll see examples like this with the James Bond film being um, very kind of a gritty action suspense theme, and Fast and the Furious or Furious 7 was one of the sequels, typically would be more upbeat, so we would expect some more complementary colors. But this particular example was a special case because, and I always forget the actor's name, but this came out soon after this particular actor passed away. He was killed in a car accident. And Vin Diesel and he were actually very close friends in real life. So this poster was almost a tribute to this person that had been a part of the movie franchise. And so they chose
Oh,
the
his name is Paul Walker.
Paul Walker. Thank you.
Yeah.
I need to write that down because I always forget it. Um,
I had to look it up. I couldn't
yes,
remember either.
but I appreciate that because so you have this as a tribute to Paul Walker, the subdued colors. It's not quite entirely colorless because you can see some sepia in the skin tones, but it's subdued enough to where it's practically achromatic and creates that more um, reserved feel that you would want with something that is in memory of this person. When you start using achromatic designs, there are some tricks you can use. One being to use an accent color. So you have a black and white scene, and then you throw in this splash of color, and it can create focal points immediately because we'll be naturally drawn to that point where the color appears. So you can use this in, say, web designs to point out important buttons or important content areas. Hi, welcome, Rob.
Hey,
Uh,
sorry I'm late.
no problem. We have just been covering the basic color schemes and showing some examples. And so this is an example of accented achromatic, which kind of deviates from the achromatic idea, but throwing that accent in there calls attention, but it also can create some symbolism as well. And this is from the movie Schindler's List, where it's been black and white the whole time, and then you have this little girl up here in the red coat that I believe is the only instance of color that really is seen. And so it creates the impression of meaning, and we start to read in some significance to that. So I touched on in going over the color schemes, which we really focused on analogous versus complementary and the differences there. I want to show some more examples of how that can be used to create mood in a story, because we were talking last week about visual story. So This touches on the field of color psychology as well. As I said earlier, I described how I sometimes compare the color in a film to the musical score because it does the same thing. It underscores the mood and the emotions that we're seeing. Going back to our advertisement focus from last week, how do you see color as being used to create mood in this particular piece? Either one of you can answer.
Um, with this one, especially with it using red, to me it brings, like a lot of passion, and like it says on there, rekindle the flame of desire, which a lot of people use the color red for. So it gives like a very desired feel to it and a very passionate feel to it.
Yeah, and this is that red again. Earlier we were talking about how red is often signifies anger, but it really can be any strong emotion, and desire is one of those. If we look at Valentine's Day, everything is red, red hearts, the red roses, and so forth. And even on the ad itself, it says rekindle the flame of desire, and so that red color is just reinforcing that. And it is color that we um, inherently associate with that idea anyway. So it's calling to mind some pretty archetypal, senses that we have. This is pretty straightforward and pretty in your face as far as the use of color. A lot of time, if you talk about films, it becomes a little more subtle. This connects back to the warm versus cool color dichotomy. And remember that cool colors tend to be lower emotional states, more reserved or more depressed. Here, Jason Bateman struggling with the toddlers, and his facial expression is very troubled, and they pair that with blue or teal, and so it automatically enhances that more low feel, low mood. Whereas Ryan Reynolds in the lower half is obviously having a better time of things and looks much happier, and is paired with warm orange in the background. And this is the one I wish I had earlier when we were talking about Gladiator, but much of it is determined by context. So you can't really say this color scheme will always be very dark and very serious as opposed to something else. It really is a blend of the imagery that's used, the verbal message that's conveyed, facial expressions, as well as color. So these color schemes are very similar to one another, but one is more sentimental, more warm and inviting, and the other is more, grim and gritty and determined. So always consider all the elements together. Remember our definition from week 1 of aesthetics, of applied media aesthetics. It's the interaction of the various media elements and our perceptual reactions to them. This is what that's talking about. Because not only do we have faces that are very friendly, they're laughing, they're smiling, paired with these warm colors that gives them a warm and inviting feel, as opposed to the dark, sour-faced Russell Crowe over here that is out for revenge. So now it becomes very fiery and kind of a symbol of his drive for revenge. Have you guys watched the series Breaking Bad?
I've seen clips of it. I really haven't gotten behind it.
Okay.
Same here.
All right. Well, then if you ever watch it, there's going to be a few spoilers here. So, but just using this as an example, because I happened to come across this infographic online, somebody has gone through the entire series of Breaking Bad and documented the colors associated with each character in each scene in each episode, and then marked what was happening at key points so that you can see the correspondence between the action and the color. I'd like to
I saw something similar with Star Wars.
Oh, yeah?
Specifically, if you follow the first trilogy,
Mm-hmm.
4, 5, and 6, if you follow the path of the way that Luke uh, travels through his the story arc, you can see that in episode 4 he's got really bright tones. In episode 5, it gets a little bit more somber, and then by the time you're in 6, even the sets, the backdrops, most of it is the colors in the background around him are really dark and gritty.
Yes, yeah, and that's what I'm talking about here too. Is it's the colors that they're wearing, it's the colors around them, any kind of objects associated with them. It all plays a part in setting up the feeling that we get for that character. And I like to use Jesse Pinkman as my example because Jesse is this young guy in the series. He's very um, he's got a very short temper. He runs off a lot at the mouth. Every other word is a curse word. Um, he goes through a lot of character development along the way, though. But thinking about that character and looking at his timeline here, you see all these warm colors, all this red and yellow, and uh, especially early on. But it's interrupted by areas where the color really kind of just goes away. Um, and I don't know if you guys can actually read this because it's pretty tiny, but right here at point number 3, it goes from a pretty good block of red into a long spot of black. So kind of not unlike what you're talking about with Luke Skywalker. Well, at this point, he's abducted by a character named Tuco, who's this really um, evil drug lord. So things are pretty bad for him, and the color goes right along with that. I have a feeling that, and I can't remember now, but he might have been locked or tied up in a dark space, and so it was very dark at that point, more so than just the clothes he was wearing. But then down here, things kind of come back, get a lot of yellows and reds again. Down here at point 5, it goes from a whole lot of really intense red to kind of gray-green to black to white and gray. So color goes out. At that point, his girlfriend dies in the series. So the color literally is gone from his life, and then short time later he goes into rehab. So it's kind of a low point for him personally in the series, and they have deliberately adjusted the color to reflect that. And these are some pictures to show what I'm talking about. Like you were saying, the environments play a part. As you see in the upper right here, even a lot of stuff in the background is red and yellow, and his clothing is heavily accented with red. Cars red, shirts, jackets, so forth. So they always had these fiery colors associated with him because on even an unconscious level, that influences our attitude towards him. Why didn't Morpheus go away? There he is. Okay. And in The Matrix, have you guys seen The Matrix?
Oh, I love The Matrix.
Okay. It's like enough time has passed now. You should see The Matrix. And I'm not even going to give a spoiler warning. But in The Matrix, the premise is they are in a artificial world. And at first, they don't tell you that. If you had never seen the film, not sure what's going on. Um, but there's kind of some hints given. And the hints are given, some of the hints take the form of the color that's used in the film. As this picture of Morpheus shows, it all has that green tint to it. And so it's not quite what we would expect in our natural lives. It just feels a little alien. It feels a little unnatural, but not to where you can really easily put your finger on it.
Well, even with the title, the title graphics leading into the first scene, you
Mm-hmm.
have the green monochromatic, or not, that's probably the wrong word, the green font up against the black as the characters are falling.
Yeah.
Uh, that kind of gives into that surrealistic of, okay, this is a computer simulation,
Mm-hmm.
and even though it shows live action characters that hint the tint of green that is on every single scene, unless they're in the real world, is is present.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that green is very much like those old computer displays, right? Those of us who are old enough
Yes.
to remember the command line operating systems with the green cursor, and then that green environment goes right along with that, as if that is now their reality. And then, like you mentioned, when they go into the real world, we suddenly have natural color again. Everything feels more alive and vibrant and more vital. And this is an extreme case because they're actually having the big celebration in the city of Zion, but so they're all sweaty and worked up. But we do see that.
There's another scene where they're in the real world, and the producers used color to kind of set the tone for what's about to happen. When Cypher goes completely crazy and starts murdering everybody, if you notice it, there's a very light, like, presence of blue, a blue tint throughout, so it brings it a more cold, almost like more or sterile, what do you want to call it, sterile environment.
Yeah, that was actually my next example. But where when they're in the real world, but outside of the safety of their home, and in the ships that they fly through in, it feels much more cold and like cold steel or cement, and just it's very uninviting, very unhealthy, and does not you don't feel comfortable and warm like you did in the previous picture. Um, and that's done intentionally as well, like as you were saying, because now they're out into this post-apocalyptic world where everything is pretty much dead. It's owned by the robots, the artificial intelligence.
Such a great series.
Yeah.
It really is.
I saw and not to derail the conversation, but I saw a post where somebody theorized that Neo was not the one, Agent Smith was the one.
I remember that. I heard that one as well because something about him breaking free of the programming.
Yep.
And I think I included this one because the Force Awakens poster has been pretty popular lately, but these are actually by the same artist, I believe, Drew Struzan, who has been doing these posters for decades. And so you can kind of see the same style and the same themes, but it's interesting that the color is used a little bit differently in the old ones versus the new posters. So you have, let's go to Star Wars. Before it was Episode 4, A New Hope, it was just Star Wars. Um, you have complementary colors. You have a lot of orange and blue, as well as some some more violets and greens, but predominantly that orange and blue contrast, with the good guys being in the warm colors. Luke, Han, and Leia have um, the yellow and orange skin tones, the orange tinted hair. C-3PO's in his gold color, and Chewie. Whereas the bad guys take the cool colors, the kind of darker cool colors, and signifying their badness, I suppose. Darth Vader is pretty obvious, but down here there's Governor Tarkin, and realistically, there's no reason for the lighting to be different on him than it is with Obi-Wan Kenobi. That it is because he's evil and therefore must be shown in this different kind of evil color scheme. In the new posters, it's somewhat flip flopped with I can't think of his name right now. Who's the bad guy in the Force Awakens?
That's Kylo Ren.
Kylo Ren, thank you. In red, with Finn appearing in blue. And I wonder if that has come about as the evolution of the color significance in Star Wars, because we've gotten to where the red lightsabers are always the bad guys, and any
Well,
color
if you actually look at the story arc behind it,
mm-hmm.
The colors here are also indicative of the characters' personalities. Kylo Ren is more aggressive and angry,
Good point.
Where Finn is more calm, cool, and collected. There are moments where he's almost detached.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm a big nerd.
No, please nerd out all you want. I'm right there with you. I'm actually disappointed in myself for not remembering Kylo Ren's name.
Well, it's because you want to forget him.
Yeah, he was something kind of a brat.
Yeah, cool story behind that guy. He's the actor is actually a former Marine.
Yeah, I remembered him from when he was in Girls, the series, and I'd heard a little bit about his background. Would not expect it, but pretty neat. So that was a really short section. I need to beef up my examples there, but the idea of color driving story, and this is something that we're going to focus on actually in the Photoshop practice this week, is using color to enhance story or mood, or kind of shift the mood of an image. Because you're going to focus on selecting a specific object in a photograph and altering the color, or altering the color of the photograph but keeping a single object untouched. So you can create those accented achromatic effects, or shift something from a more subdued feel to a more fiery feel, or something along those lines. It really can drive the mood and drive the story. The other thing that color is good for is directing attention. Next week, we're going to talk about what's called visual hierarchy, which is basically what gets the most emphasis versus what's considered less of a priority, and how do you convey that to your audience and make them pick up on what you're trying to emphasize. Color is a big part of that. When you look at this, what's the first thing your eye goes to? Probably that mushroom, right? I stole this off a friend's Instagram account, by the way. I'm declaring fair use for education purposes, but so this is a complementary color pair, red and green, with a green field, an entire backdrop of green with that one splash of red. So our eyes naturally look for difference, for a break in the pattern, and this fits that requirement. It's a change, and so our eye jumps to that point. Filmmakers certainly use this. This is from the recent Cinderella live action film. Gold is a warm color. It's essentially in the orange and yellow range on the color wheel, which would be opposite of blue. And so putting her in that bright blue gown in this gold carriage is a way of directing your focus.
It's kind of interesting how they layered that because you've got the dark background and then you scale into the orange and then your eye drops right into the blue of the dress and the two gentlemen on the side are completely lost
Yeah,
as
yes.
far as attention is concerned.
Yeah, and I don't think I have it, but there's another scene where they're in the ballroom and they're dancing. Basically, she and the prince are dancing, and the crowd is all around them. But you notice that everybody else in the crowd are dressed in colors that allow her to still stand out. It's kind of like you people were not allowed to wear these colors because that wouldn't distract attention from Cinderella. So it's very much planned that way. You kind of get a hint of actually how big of a nerd I am by the examples that I pick too. The Harry Potter series. This is, we have Harry Potter in his Gryffindor robes playing Quidditch, and this is a very fast moving action scene, zooming around the field on the brooms, but you want to keep attention on Harry Potter. So what do? You make everything else the complementary color to red so that he stays in focus. Even the stands, the towers that look like they're probably a yellow still have that greenish tint so that Harry stays right there in focus. And we can easily follow him as he's zooming around. Whereas Draco in his Slytherin robes, they're green, so they're going to blend in a little more. So even though he's in the foreground, he's not our center of focus. And I hope, yes, there it is. I never am sure if I include the slide or not. Same idea used in newscasts. The backdrops are almost always blue. There's sometimes monitors or a city skyline or something that looks like it should be significant, but it's really just decoration. But they always use those cool colors because all natural skin tones are in the warm color range, and so they're going to keep their talking head as the center of our focus by using that
The
color.
only exception to that rule would be ESPN. They have a lot of reds.
Oh yeah,
A lot of reds and oranges are used on their sets.
I'll have to check that out. I wonder what the intention there is. If it's simply because it is sports focused and wants the more energetic feel.
I think that's what I can come up with is that yeah, that's they're trying to people think of red, they think of fast, they think of strength, they think of
Mm-hmm.
action. So I think that's what they were going for. I don't know. I'm not part of that crew, so I don't know.
Yeah, but it's something I would like to look at because it fits into this because all these things are very deliberately done for a purpose. But in this case, it is very much to focus attention. I want to get an example of the use of this idea in live entertainment as well. I've seen pictures from some of the theme parks where they'll use layers of warm and cool colors to create a sense of distance and depth and just really make some visual interesting effects that way.
So as far as like live entertainment, you're speaking amusement parks solely, or are you talking also like
Um,
Broadway and
yeah,
stage production?
stage production as well.
Well,
Yeah, you
I'll have
can.
to look. I'll look through my archives of photos and see if I have anything. I've taken some photos of live entertainment venues.
Yeah, I was thinking I'm actually, as it happens, I'm actually studying production design for theater now, in outside of work, and saw a local production recently that they used the lighting to turn the wall, the backdrop in the far back blue to allow these faux windows to stand out and give a sense of depth that way. So the windows were lit in a more of a uh, warm tone, so it gave the impression of there was a sunny day outside, but the walls behind them were lit in blue, so that it gave that feeling of some depth and three dimensionality.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I went and saw Rent live, and that was a beautiful, beautiful production.
Oh, I love Rent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great, great show. And the production crew that did this, because I saw it when I was in Korea, and they did an amazing job with just the set work and the use of lights, the use of colors to layer the foreground, the midground, and the background. And even when you consider what the actors themselves are wearing, they create that sense of depth by varying the key tones that the main persons are wearing versus who's in the background.
Yeah, so very much like the Cinderella film that we were looking at earlier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know with a lot of theater, they have to use a lot of color to bring the focus into like certain characters
Mm-hmm.
because, with theater, you're just on a stage. You don't have,
Right.
all this space to really work with, so you really have to use what you got. Because, I mean, I was doing theater in high school for basically my whole high school career.
Yeah.
And we had to use like a lot of colors with our set designs and with like our costumes and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely an art to it, and it uses color to create essentially optical illusions of depth and space. Because, like you said, you're very limited in the space you have, so create that using the tools you have available. And let's see. So, and this was color for directing attention. The same principles apply here. You're using complementary or analogous colors, using complementary colors to add emphasis, and analogous to allow things to kind of blend in. And the last use of color that I was going to cover tonight is using color for branding. And this still uses those same ideas of the various color schemes, complementary, analogous, monochromatic, and so forth. It also touches on some color psychology in thinking about the car ad with the red background and what feelings or ideas we have associated with color. Color psychology is an odd topic because there's a lot of different ways of approaching it. A lot of it is cultural. So in your culture, you become associate. You connect colors with specific ideas. I used to use the example of red and green being the colors of Christmas. Especially in the U.S., where that's really common and popular. Um, in China and in some other Eastern countries, red is the color of good fortune, new beginnings. So that weddings, New Year's, the birth of a child, you'll see a lot of red. The red envelopes and decorations. Um, Whereas it wouldn't really have that connotation to a lot of people in the U.S. So a lot of the color psychology is based on our upbringing and what our experience in culture. Thinking about words like what do you associate with green? Even though the word green might be associated with money, or especially in modern times with environmentally friendliness, green initiatives or going green and so forth. Um, So that's how a lot of these color associations develop. Very few of them are innate. There's only a few color associations that are instinctual, and red is one of those. Red has an interesting effect on people. It's called the red effect, appropriately enough, to where it causes a very, very, very slight diminishing of rational thought and decision making. I think in the textbook reading that was linked for this exploration, it talked about Target stores using a lot of red and how they associate that to some extent with the amount of impulse buying that takes place when you go into Target. Also, sports teams or gaming teams like the Halo, the Xbox game Halo, when you have the teams, one team is red, one team is blue, the red team will typically statistically win more often because the other team is seeing the red uniforms and being exposed to that. It's very, very, very minuscule, but it's statistically visible when you examine it. So that's one of the colors that does have an instinctive effect. Green is another one, because when we're in environments with a lot of green plants and so forth, it tends to be very calming. But that's getting into some tangent topics, but still kind of relevant because color plays a huge part in branding. And just to be clear, branding is not just a logo. Branding is everything that's associated with developing the personality and identity of a product or a company, that brand. It becomes recognizable. Take a look at these examples. These are pretty iconic brands, Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks. When you flip their color schemes, it's kind of, you're taken aback a little bit because we are so used, especially with Starbucks, it's so ubiquitous in our world that when it's no longer that familiar green color, you almost don't recognize it. And it shows how integral color is to creating that brand identity. And it's not even that these colors are symbolic, but simply that they are just a part of who that company is. So choosing these colors and keeping them consistent is a part of building familiarity. This is directly from Full Sail's style guide. These are our brand colors. And you'll see these in the letterhead, in the business cards, but also in things like the catalog. Any kind of printed publications will use those same colors. Something you're going to do in this week's section of the mood board is to select a color scheme. The idea here is that you are creating your personal brand colors. And so you want to think about what kind of personality do you want to express for yourself as a media professional or as a person, or whatever specialty you fall into. Sometimes you'll see these charts, and I really don't like these charts. They talk about this in the Linda lesson as well, and I really, in a way, wish they didn't, because it gives the impression that specific colors have specific meanings, kind of like looking at a dream interpretation book or something, where it's really not that cut and dry. A lot of it depends on the context. And let me find an example. If colors could be that clearly associated with meaning, then you would expect, say, Amazon to have a similar personality to say Harley Davidson or Fanta, and those are drastically different things. You really don't have that. It's not that easy to just say, okay, well, we want a cheerful impression, so let's use orange. Um, the only exception that I really see as far as a trend goes is that more conservative or reserved business-like brands tend to use the primary colors, red and blue and yellow. Whereas once you get into some of these tertiary colors like purple and some of the other combination colors, then you start getting into some brands that are more lighthearted, more quirky. Purple in particular is generally seen as a very quirky color. So that's where you find sci-fi and Barbie and things of that nature. Here are some examples of some logo designs. And you can see how those color schemes, there's monochromatic, analogous, complementary, are still playing a part, still doing the exact same thing they did in any other kind of medium. But look at how purposeful the color selections are here. Intel is a company that creates components for computers, so they're very much involved in creating business machines. Their logo is a reserved monochromatic blue, so very businesslike. Firefox wants a more upbeat, fun, and exciting look, so they have complementary orange and blue with the Firefox streak going around the world, so it has a dynamic look in addition to a dynamic color scheme. Why do you think BP chose the colors that they did? And the design of their logo, for that matter.
I would think that they would be using, like, especially with the shape of the design right there. To me, it looks more like a leaf and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And with them going with the greens and yellows, it would bring more like an environmentally friendly look to it.
Bingo, yeah, right. Because what is BP is British Petroleum, so it's an oil company. Not really thought of as the most environmentally friendly companies. So this is very much a PR initiative. They want to give that idea of being, friendly to the earth and to the environment. So they have this very natural looking logo design, looks like a flower or a leaf, blooming plant. The colors are green, which is, we think of as environmentally friendly. Life, it's symbolic of life and growing things. So that was very deliberately done. So, and this is the idea. When you go to pick your brand colors, sometimes I'll see students will pick colors that are simply colors they like. And that's okay. You can start with that. But also think about, what impression are you trying to make? Do you want to be seen as a serious professional? Then something more reserved would be called for. If you want to be seen as more fun and outgoing and dynamic, then you can get into some complementary colors, but also maybe some more, some more interesting and unusual colors, like we saw with the Alice in Wonderland poster, where it was a lot of purples and yellows and red and green and blue and orange all thrown together. So ultimately, it really comes down to that. Do you want, what impression do you want to make? Using those colors that we saw in the Alice in Wonderland poster probably isn't going to create the most business-like impression, but it could be good for somebody who's an entertainer or a personality online or in the media. What do I have? Okay, so when you go to choose your colors, a way to go about this could be to look at your mission statement. Look at the visual themes that you chose in week 1. Think about what personality those embody and what color goes along with that. Start with a single color and then decide if you want to increase the energy and make it more vibrant. You could go with a complementary color. So say you started with something like a teal and you wanted to give that more energetic feel, then you can pair that with one or two of its complements, something in the orange and red range. Or if you wanted it to be more subdued, more reserved, you could pair that with some blues and greens. So and go with analogous color schemes. And it really just comes down to that idea. What impression do you want to make? And so this is what you'll be documenting in your mood board this week, is those choice of colors. I wouldn't go more than 4 colors tops, probably, and I would say 2 to 3 is a good target. Just occasionally I see choices of 6 colors or more. It's getting a little much unless you're intentionally picking, say, like a rainbow or something very colorful, parrot or some kind of colorful bird as a symbol, and you want to emulate that. I would stick to just a handful of colors, 2 or 3, because they become very iconic, just like UPS with their brown and gold. Or the golden arches for McDonald's. It becomes part of the personality and the identity. Too many colors becomes too hard to remember from the standpoint of your clients, your audience. Okay. Are there any questions on anything that we've covered?
I do have one question regarding the email that was sent out about Hurricane Matthew.
Sure.
An email was sent out. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. It says that classes will be canceled from 9 a.m. Thursday, October 6th until Monday, 9 a.m. on Monday, October 10th. Will that affect our due dates or anything for our projects this week?
Yes. Yes, it will. Good question. Yeah, even though we're an online class, we are going to, classes are canceled for online classes as well, which means that the Photoshop practice and the mood board assignment will be pushed to early next week. And I'll be making those changes immediately after we finish up here. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that. It'll give you a few more days.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, you can thank Hurricane Matthew.
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. No. So, and the idea is, even though we're all working remote for this course, they don't want faculty having to come into campus, even though a lot of us work from home. But safety first. So there you go. But as I was saying earlier, even though you have a few more days, stay on top of the work if you can, because it's going to bump right into next week's assignments, and so you don't want to get too piled up. And that is that. So this was what I had prepared for this evening. I appreciate you both joining me and your participation. It's always good to have some discussion. If you have any other questions, let me know. If not, I'm happy to let you go for the evening.
Thank you for your time.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so for the mood board this week, we're just choosing the brand colors and everything in our color palettes.
Yeah, you'll choose the colors, create a color palette, and give a summary of why you chose those colors. And indicate what color scheme they match. That's something that's often overlooked. Is this complementary? Are these analogous? Is it something else? Talk about that. Talk about why you chose those colors, and be sure to record the color codes. Those are important.
Definitely. Okay. So with that, we can basically just do it however we want to. We can do it like analogous, we can do it complementary, we can do like triad or
Yeah. Yeah, as long as you show me that you understand why you're picking those colors and why what kind of impression that color scheme will create, then you're on the right track. Because really, I'm just looking for understanding that you kind of know what you're doing and what you're talking about.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
This one sounds like it'll be fun for me because I've done something similar to this in high school.
Yeah.
We had to basically make our own personal brand as
Okay.
well back then.
And yeah, you've got something to draw from. And what's neat about this week you're picking your colors. Next week you're going to pick typefaces. And so you're kind of creating a very loose style guide for your personal brand. It's not set in stone. You can change it. After this class, you don't have to stick to it. But when you get to graphic design with Jacob Kaplan down the road, um, he's going to revisit this, and you can build on this and make use of these choices that you made at this point. So it's an opportunity to start building that personal brand.
Sounds like it's gonna be fun.
Well, I hope you do have fun with it because that makes it a lot more tolerable. but, yep. So looking forward to seeing what you all come up with.